Gris. Gris manages to convey the psychological process of grieving purely through its stunning visuals and captivating soundtrack. Through the use of symbolism and the absence of dialogue, it creates an emotional experience that leaves it up to the player to make out the true meaning of it for themselves. Gris is a 2D puzzle platformer game developed by Namada Studios and released by Devolver Digital. The game is accessible on multiple devices. The game follows the emotional journey of a young girl named Gris who is navigating through a world that reflects her sorrow and pain. The story begins with Gris awakening in the palm of a crumbling statue's hand. She attempts to sing and we discover that she has lost her voice. The hand breaks in pieces, causing her to fall. When she eventually lands, the game begins. Throughout the game, Gris has to collect stars that will allow her to gain new abilities that help her to navigate through different landscapes and puzzles. These abilities are symbolic of her emotional growth and healing while she is traversing the 5 stages of grief. Gris is frequently interpreted and analyzed as the grieving of a close relative, in this case Gris' mother. Most analyses follow the Kubler-Ross grief cycle. However, the absence of dialogue gives the opportunity to the player to interpret it and connect with it in their own way. So I let a classmate who has never played Gris and was not aware of the initial interpretation play through the game and tell me what they thought the game meant to them. Due to the fact that the game seemed too personal to be about a different person, they've come to the conclusion that Gris wasn't a journey of grieving for someone else's death, but a journey of self-grieving. Grieving for a past version of yourself that is no longer there, or even a future version of yourself that you'll never be able to become. In this video analysis, I will be going through the Kubler-Ross cycle of grief, talking about the 5 different stages of grief and making a comparison between the initial meaning of the game and the way my classmate interpreted it. Starting off with the first stage, denial. In Gris, denial is represented by the color white. In the Kubler-Ross model of grief, Gris is walking forward, clearly feeling numb. She can't do anything but walk or fall. Thoughts like, she can't be gone, it's not real, can be linked to what she might be feeling. Broken pieces of statues are laying around her, statues representing the death of her mother. On the other hand, if you see it as self-grieving, Gris is actively trying to ignore the broken piece of statue around her, thinking, I'm not broken, there's nothing wrong with me, everything is fine and I'm just tired. The statues in this version represent other versions of herself that she lost. She can no longer be the person she was, and this is putting her through pain. We quickly go on to the next stage, anger, represented by a blood red color. In the Kubler-Ross interpretation, Gris is finally letting go of her emotions after repressing them during the denial stage, thinking, stop saying they're gone, they're not gone, why did they leave me? Her emotions take the form of anger. The storm represents the reality that she tries so hard to escape. She later gets the ability to turn into a block, which allows her to surpass the storm but also destroy objects around her. In the interpretation of self-grieving, Gris feels powerless, thinking, why am I so weak? I've been through worse things. Other people have gone through worse things, so why am I like this? That anger is represented in the form of a storm that blows Gris away, making her unable to move forward. Gris tries to force herself through the storm despite the fact that she is unable to. After that comes bargaining, represented by a nice green colored forest. The initial interpretation of it shows Gris trying to seek for a way to make things go easier for her. Thinking, what if I just follow along, be good, then she won't be sick anymore, or she'll come back. I will carry on, I promise, as long as you hold up your end. Gris seeks to take care and support another living creature in the hope that this will make what she's going through easier to live through. In the self-grieving process, Gris tries to push forward and find something to hold that will give her the strength to keep going. During this stage, Gris learns the ability to jump higher and further, representing the progress that she's making into healing and getting better. She also meets a new friend that she spends some time with. This stage seems very calm and quiet at first, but at the end Gris is confronted by a black bird, representing her self-doubt and intrusive thoughts. The bird tries to attack her and bring her down. Gris uses her block ability. In a way, she's making herself stronger and tougher to protect herself and fight against her intrusive thoughts. Even though she succeeds in defeating it, she ends up feeling down as well, which brings us to the next stage. Depression, like in lots of other symbolic works, is represented by a deep blue color. In Kubler-Ross's depression stage, Gris falls into a slump, thinking she's really gone. What am I without her? Gris finally realizes her mother is actually gone. After the previous stages, that realization finally hits her. She swims in the depths of her own thoughts, feeling lonely, until she finally comes back to the statue of her mother, ready to take on the next part of her journey. In the self-grieving analysis, Gris feels overwhelmed by her emotions, thinking everything is just too much, I can't deal with any of this anymore. In this stage, Gris literally drowns in her own thoughts. After a fight against her own intrusive thoughts, she drowns in them. She can't handle the negativity anymore, causing her to sink deeper and deeper into a dark cave. There she meets a red turtle that will eventually serve as the guiding light out of this cave, which could be interpreted as a friend helping her through her depression, the hardest part of her healing process. In the acceptance stage, both interpretations are quite similar. In both versions, Gris finally accepts what is happening to her, but in different ways. In the initial interpretation with the Kubler-Ross cycle of grief, she finally accepts that her mother will no longer be by her side, but that she has to keep going no matter what happened to her. But in the self-grieving interpretation, she accepts that some past or future versions of her are no longer a part of herself. No matter how much she wants to go back to who she was or who she wanted to become, she simply cannot do that. But she accepts it and finally goes on with her life. After getting back to the statue, the black bird tries to attack her again, following her into the water as an eel. The intrusive thoughts get more intense the harder she tries to get away from it. The eel splits up into a multitude of smaller eels, signifying how it's not always one big negative thought trying to bring you down, but it can also be smaller thoughts overwhelming you into a deep spiral of negative emotions, like you'll never amount to anything, or you'll be alone from now on, you'll never be the person you want to be, used to be so smart, or even you're such a coward. After the chase, she finally escapes it. She swims through a quiet cave until the giant eel suddenly surges out of the depth of the tunnel to try and swallow her again, which can be seen as how intrusive thoughts can and will come out at moments you at least expect them to. They will sneak up on you regardless of whether or not something triggered it. The turtle comes back and saves you from the eel, once again like an old friend saving you from the depth of your sorrows. During the stage of acceptance, all the colors we've unlocked during the game come together as a whole. The yellow lights of the acceptance stage represent a more positive path towards healing and a more positive outlook on life. Gris finally regains her ability to sing, which allows her to bring flowers back to life and makes certain sceneries more appealing.
After she gathers the remaining stars, she gets back to the statue, ready to leave it all behind. But once again, the black creature, previously shown as a bird or an eel, finally comes back again. This time we visually see that it was Gris herself all along. Her intrusive thoughts quite literally swallow her and her world up. Gris ends up being face to face with a statue which can either be interpreted as the grave of her mother, or a different version of herself which is now dead. She fixes the broken statue, which again can be seen as her other or Gris herself. Her intrusive thoughts engulf her again until the statue saves her by singing along. They both sing together, bringing Gris's world back together. Gris finally says goodbye to the statue, which can be seen as her finally moving on from her mother's death and giving her a last farewell, or as her embracing herself for the last time, ready to leave certain parts of herself behind and accepting herself the way she is now. Gris is a game that allows its players to feel emotions. Everyone is invited to understand the story in the way they see fit, whether that is the way the developers intended it to be seen as, a pure journey of healing after the painful loss of a loved one, or something different, more internal and personal like the grieving of the self. Gris is a game that is intended to emotionally touch its audience through its pure visuals and unique storytelling, and that is made possible through the absence of dialogue and text, leaving us with a story free from pressure to understand its psychological journey.